Welcome to the Dark Psychology Atlas. Today, we're mapping a really hidden mechanism of control, and that's obedience. But not the kind you're thinking of, not the kind that comes from a threat. We're talking about that quiet, almost automatic compliance that happens every single day, often without us even realizing it. We're going to deconstruct the signals that trigger our submission before our rational mind even gets a chance to weigh in. So let me just ask you this, straight up. Why do you obey when no one's actually forcing you to? It sounds like a simple question, right? But the answer? Well, it reveals a psychological reality that most of us would really rather not look at. So, that brings us to our first section, the compliance illusion. We're about to take apart a very common and, frankly, a fundamentally wrong belief that we have about how we make our own decisions. And here it is. This is the critical gap in our understanding of ourselves. The story we tell ourselves, our belief, is that we are rational beings. We weigh the options, we think it through, and then we choose to obey. But the psychological reality is just so much more automatic. We don't obey based on reason. We obey based on triggers, specific signals that completely bypass our critical thinking. The thing is, this automatic obedience, it's not random at all. It actually follows very distinct patterns that show up again and again across all kinds of social structures. So, let's dig into 3 of the most powerful signals right now. All right, signal number 1 is that authority acts like a switch. It just flicks off our independent judgment. When a person we perceive as an authority figure gives us an order, our brain does something fascinating. It doesn't analyze the order itself. It analyzes the authority. And if that authority is seen as legitimate, obedience just follows. It happens before we can even begin to reflect on it. The authority figure becomes a kind of thinking substitute, and we basically just outsource our own cognitive responsibility to them. Now, the second signal is even more subtle. We comply way more easily with power that feels legitimate than with power that uses brute force. Think about it. A uniform, a title, a specific role in an organization. These things make a power structure feel natural, not like something being forced on us. And all of a sudden, resisting just feels socially inappropriate. It feels awkward. So compliance becomes the default, the path of least resistance. Because the power doesn't even register as power. It just feels like the way things are supposed to be. And that leads us to signal number 3. Symbols replace proof. A lab coat, a judge's robe, that big corner office. These visual markers are so incredibly potent that they often just eliminate any need for actual justification. We see the symbol and our mind just grants authority right then and there, before any real evidence of competence has been shown. Once that symbol is accepted, proof becomes almost irrelevant. Okay, so we've seen the patterns, but what's really driving all this? What's the underlying psychological mechanism that's making this happen deep in our subconscious? Here's the key. This isn't some kind of moral weakness. Obedience is a deeply, deeply ingrained cognitive shortcut. You see, our brains are wired to conserve energy. And when we're navigating complex social hierarchies, just deferring to a recognized authority is a super efficient subconscious hack. It's a survival mechanism, plain and simple. But while this mechanism might be efficient, being blind to it comes at a huge cost. So let's talk about who loses power by not understanding how these obedience triggers really work. Well, when you don't recognize these signals, your actions become predictable. You end up unconsciously outsourcing your moral and practical responsibility to other people. You start mistaking the symbols of authority, the title, the uniform, for actual substance, for real competence. And maybe most importantly, all of this just makes you incredibly easy to control. So the real advantage here isn't about learning some secret tactics to resist or to manipulate. No, it's about a fundamental shift in your perception. It's about starting to see the machinery that's always operating just beneath the surface of our social interactions. And here's the difference in a nutshell. The unaware person, well, they see a doctor. They register a person, a title, a uniform. But the aware person sees that exact same scene and perceives the mechanics underneath. They see the title as a trigger, the lab coat as a symbol, and their own instinct to just go along with it as a cognitive shortcut. They see both the player and the rules of the game at the same time. So, the final step in all of this isn't to just see it in other people, it's to recognize it in yourself. I want you to consider 3 questions. First one, who do you defer to automatically? I mean, without thinking, without even questioning it. Could be a boss, a parent, some kind of expert. Who gets your yes before the question is even fully out of their mouth? Second question, in the hierarchy of your own mind, who appears above you? Now, this might not be on some official org chart. It's about the psychological space that people take up in your world. Who do you instinctively place on a higher rung of the ladder? And finally, what symbols influence you? Is it a university degree hanging on a wall? A certain brand of car? Maybe it's just a specific way of talking. Take a second and really think about the quiet, visual signals that command your respect and shape your compliance, often without a single word ever being spoken.